At some point in the 1800s, an evangelist arrived in Augusta, Georgia. This particular evangelist had a goal. He wanted to preach. And there was this one particular pillar in the middle of the town, in the middle of the market, that he thought was the best possible place he could stand in order to share the gospel. He was denied access by those in the town. And this evangelist, deciding that that was against the Lord's work, that was clearly like not the way God wanted this to unfold, decided to place a curse upon the pillar, rather upon the town, sort of more protection upon the pillar. So this pillar, he said, would be the only thing to stand following a great wind that would come through the town and decimate it. As legend goes, a freak tornado came out of nowhere shortly after this little encounter, if you will, and in fact destroyed everything in the market. Everything, that is, except for the lone pillar. And the curse that this minister supposedly placed upon this pillar said that anyone who tried to remove it, anyone who tried to take it down, would meet an untimely death. And as the legend goes, over the next 150 years, construction workers, electrical repair folks, linemen who got near the pillar in any attempt to try to augment it, change it, move it, met untimely fates, struck by lightning, hit by cars. And the pillar still remained. Is it a curse? Or is it just really strange coincidence? Let's look at it today on this episode of Urban Legends Unmasked with me, your host, Chad Lehrman. Whatever may be the true story behind this evangelist, the truth of the matter is that Will Jennings, the mayor of Augusta in 1931, decided that, hey, this legend's getting around. People are hearing about it. Let's use it to increase tourism. And so he began to really hire a firm, and he actually brought some people in there hoping that, people would come to see the cursed pillar. Smart move on Will Jennings' part. I think that's a great idea. We know that the macabre and the terrifying and the horrific tend to draw people. We like tragedy for whatever sick reason we are as human beings. But the point is that this particular pillar, which it's a pretty basic pillar. I mean, you can find the images of this anywhere you want online. But that's the only place you'll be able to find those pictures. And we'll get to that at the end of the episode. We'll explain that, why it's going to be very difficult for you to go visit this now. But the point is that this very bland pillar that sits on the corner in Augusta, Georgia, while other buildings around it are fine and everything's normal, it draws people. It draws curiosity and people wanting to know what's going on. I don't know for sure if there really were things like, lightning bolts striking workers who got too close to the pillar with machinery, or, any sort of things that really just back up this whole cursed pillar thing. But there are images of the pillar standing and destruction all around it. So there does seem to be some indication that something did in fact happen. And obviously it looks like, taking a look at the images online, it looks like it did once belong to a structure, a much larger structure. How long ago that was, what that had to do with a preacher placing a curse on it, I don't know. But I will tell you this, I was a minister for a time, and I can tell you that in my 11 years in ministry, I never placed a curse on anyone. Nor do I know any ministers who do place curses. That's not really what we do as ministers. Now, there are ministers who curse at people and who say really bad things about them. That I know. Just go on TikTok. You can find that real quick. So there's ministers who do that, but that doesn't seem very ministerial, if you will. It doesn't seem very godly to place curses on small towns because they wouldn't preach there. But at the same time, I also want to like kind of hint that maybe there is some validity to this claim that a minister did come to town, was denied access, an evangelist in particular, and that they did kind of in a fit of anger maybe place a curse. When I was in college, I went to Texas A&M, and occasionally there would be these traveling evangelists that would come to town. And they would set up on campus. Usually they would set up in front of our academic building or by one of the many statues around town. And they were, to put it mildly, abusively arrogant. They were not very nice people, and they were very, very accusatory. They were definitely of the fire and brimstone type. They accused people of things. They told them they were going to burn in hell, and all the typical things that the really negative side of evangelism like personifies, and they were that's what they were. So I know that exists. I know that those kind of evangelists exist just as much as I know that there are those evangelists who are truly kind and compassionate and considerate and love others and want to serve other people. And so so it does track that there might have been a minister who decided to take personally the rejection and call out the town. It's going to be a lot harder to prove whether or not the minister actually called down a curse. So I'm going to go a little theological here and say, really, is that possible? Like, does the Christian theology, which I'm assuming this evangelist was, based upon all the context I've read about it, that this Christian minister, is there a curse in the Judeo-Christian traditions? And the answer to that is, yeah, there are curses. There definitely are curses. Whether or not the power of the curse comes from God or from the guy with the horns is the question. There's a great story. People always wonder, like, how, as a former minister, do you believe in ghosts? And my answer is, I've never seen a ghost, but I, yes, believe in the possibility of the ghost. And if I believe in the possibility of ghosts, then I have to believe in the possibility of some sort of supernatural curse. So let me back up a little bit. Why I believe in ghosts is because there is a biblical story. It's a story of Saul, the king of Israel, and the day before a battle, he decides to go to a witch, the witch of Endor. Yes, the same Endor that one would find in Star Wars. I'm pretty sure this is where they got the idea. George Lucas snipped the idea from the Bible. Let's call the planet with the furry little bears Endor. Anyway, the witch of Endor is known for being a conjurer and a person who can commune with the spirits. So Saul goes and says, hey, I want to talk to this guy named Samuel. Samuel was the prophet that was sort of the prophet of the time. He had died. And Saul says, hey, I really want to know, am I going to win this battle? Call up Samuel, see what the prophet says. So she does. She calls up Samuel, and Samuel is not a happy man. He was at rest, and he begins to literally curse Saul. He says, you will die. Basically, you have disturbed my rest. You're a dead man. And sure enough, the next day in battle, Saul is yeeted. Like, he's out. He's done. Okay. He dies in battle. Now, that covers two things. One, there is a biblical precedent for a ghost. Two, there is a biblical precedent for a curse. And actually, a super secret. Three, don't mess with either one of them. They're bad things. Nothing good comes from calling the dead back, and nothing good comes from curses. So don't do them. Needless to say, this evangelist in Augusta, Georgia in the 1800s clearly had skipped that part of Sunday school and decided to say, you know what, I'm going to place a curse on this pillar. And he does. So as we flash forward through time, again, not finding, verifiable proof that there had been any sort of horrific deaths to those who tried to harm the pillar. But plenty of proof that there is a pillar who oddly still exists as the world around it begins to move on. That here's this ancient pillar, it's still there, no one's messing with it. So do I believe that the pillar could have been haunted? Possibly. It's entirely possible. Again, I do believe in the supernatural. I do believe in the possibility of those things. To quote an episode of Criminal Minds, if you believe in one thing, meaning God or the devil, then you kind of have to believe in the other. And I do tend to agree with this fictional TV show, which actually sometimes gets things right. And that is the fact that I do believe, if you believe that there is a God, then you probably need to believe there's a devil. Or conversely, if you believe or are willing to accept that there is a devil, then you should believe that there is a God. Now, that's my personal opinion. And so, with that in mind, my personal opinion is that if this minister did in fact place a curse upon this pillar, then yeah, it's possible that it existed. It's also very possible that this minister was denied for a reason. If the first response you have when you're told, no, we can't have you preach here today, is that I curse upon your houses, that's a problem. Okay, that's not the kind of minister you want. So they were probably right to say, no, you can't do this. That being said, there are histories of curses throughout the Judeo-Christian, sort of tradition, beyond Samuel. One of the more famous, or maybe I should say infamous, is one that is used by some really terrible groups today, very anti-Semitic groups, your white nationalist movements, your Nazis, who basically claim that there is a blood curse on the Jewish people. They argue that because it was Jewish leaders who sentenced or requested Jesus be sentenced to death, that there is some sort of curse that exists upon them. There's no biblical precedent for this. There's no true statement of this. It's just sort of a tradition that's gotten passed down by really dark groups, really not God-centered groups, if you will. And so that curse may or may not exist. History definitely shows that some really bad things have happened to the Jewish people, aside from even the Holocaust. I mean, the Holocaust is obviously our biggest example of that, but we have seen numerous situations where anytime something goes on, it is the Jewish people that are blamed. Now, is that a curse or is that racism? Or is racism a curse? Maybe a little bit of all those things, okay? So the point is that, we maybe don't have curses as often as we do just really bad human behavior. So this minister, ironically, this evangelist, is probably displaying some really bad human behavior, which is why he's not allowed to speak in the South in the 1800s, which is a resoundingly Christian area. So I don't think it's because they were like, oh, he's going to preach us something that is anti-Christian. It's probably like, why are you coming here? We are good. We do not need you, which he probably argued with. Now, back to the pillar. I mentioned earlier that it would be very, very difficult for you to locate said pillar anymore, to find it, to discover it. And that's because a very ironic turn of events happened. I laugh. In 2016, in December of 2016, a car hit it. And when I say hit it, I don't mean like, you're driving up to the grocery store and you bump the wall. You get a little too close and you bump it, or you bump the car in front of you. I mean, like, decimated it. This thing is a pile of rubble. It is hit, it is crushed, destroyed, it is down, and will not be rebuilt. The pillar's gone. So I know what you're thinking. Like, okay, wait a minute. Why? Why would the pillar that was stood 100 years or 100 or more years of maybe like attempts to have it removed or things to be destroyed, why would suddenly a car take it out? Now, I don't know about this. My other questions might be, did the driver die? And I'm sorry, I laugh. I have dark humor. I laugh and I apologize. But did the driver die? Because if the driver died, then the curse kind of took one last victim, arguably. If they didn't die, and you do believe that it was cursed, how do you rationalize that? How do you justify that understanding that this cursed object suddenly became vulnerable? And I have an answer. What if curses come with expiration dates? That's right. What if a curse is not meant to last forever? What if a curse sometimes runs out? Maybe this guy, we don't have a date for when this guy made the curse, but maybe, curses run out after 150 years or 100 years. And when that does, then, it's fair game. And maybe nobody tried to take the thing down because during the time the curse existed, so many bad things happened that people believed it was going to be perpetual. So is it possible that curses have sort of a shelf life, if you will? And I think the answer is probably, I don't know. Like, that's my answer. I don't really know. I don't curse people. I don't know how it works. I am not a crazed evangelist in the 1800s in Georgia, nor am I a witch of Endor or a deceased prophet brought back to life. I'm not any of the things that I know seem to instill curses. But what I can tell you is that as urban legends go, this one's fairly benign. I mean, it's not one that's really warning you of things. It's not, I don't think, like intentionally trying to terrify you. But maybe it is, if I dig really hard and I look at it in just the right light, maybe what this legend is trying to say is, don't forget your past. Which serves as a very ironic statement for Georgia, because Georgia is one of those states in the South that has a lot of statues that have been up and have been much in controversy in the last few years about whether or not certain parts of our history need to be memorialized in concrete statues, or do they need to be removed? And so this pillar goes down shortly before that real rage and anger about Civil War heroes being memorialized, slave owners being memorialized. Really before that anger sort of reached the public consciousness to the level that it is today, this pillar is destroyed shortly before that. And so it doesn't stand as a reminder anymore that, hey, we gotta remember our past. Maybe the deeper lesson here, and this is something we can draw from the destruction of the pillar, is that sometimes it's time to let the past go. Maybe it's time for us to recognize that the thing which gave so much power to these inanimate objects is no longer got a hold on us. Maybe it's time to let them go. I'm a big believer we've got to remember history, but there's a difference between remembering history and celebrating history. And there are certain things in history we definitely need to remember, but we should never celebrate. I don't think the pillar's that. But I do think that the metaphor works. I think that maybe this pillar, for a long time, maybe reminded us that sometimes even religious people can be jerks. And sometimes we need to remember that. So if you were a Christian and perhaps ever got a chance to see this Georgia pillar, maybe you look at it and go, man, I don't want to be like that guy. I hope you would. I as a Christian myself, as a former minister and still acting Christian, I definitely believe in being a better person, learning from the mistakes that others have done. And so I look at this minister and his curse because he didn't get what he wanted, and I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be that guy as a Christian. I want to be that guy as a person. As a high school teacher, I don't want to be that guy who holds grudges on students. I tell them on day one, I'm like, look, guys, I respect you no matter what. I give you respect. You don't have to earn respect with me. Trust is different. Break my trust, and it's going to be hard to rebuild that, but I will respect you and I will treat you as a human being. And as much as possible, I will treat you like an adult and an equal. That being said, let's talk about how to maintain trust. And so at the end of this story, as we wrap up talking about the haunted pillar of Augusta, which is dead as it can possibly be, it is dust, literally. Let's just remember that maybe there are haunted pillars in our lives that exist as a reminder to not be a bad person. Also, don't curse people. It's a bad thing. This has been Urban Legends Unmasked. I'm your host, Chad Lehrman. I do sincerely hope that you'll check us out next time as we move on to our next of the 50 states. And between then, go ahead and check out some of my books. Actually, one kind of related to what we talked about today. My latest book is a nonfiction book on the culture of American Christianity. It's called Toxic, and it's basically talking about, imagine we had an entire nation's church filled with people that were like this minister who cursed those who disagreed with him. How do we fix that? That's the answer that you'll find in Toxic. So if you're looking for those kind of things to read, as well as horror stories, I've got them all on Amazon. Check them out there. Other than that, we will see you next time on Urban Legends Unmasked.